Hello and welcome to Transplants Take on Sport. My name's Lewis Daniels and joining me today is liver cancer survivor, liver transplant recipient and marathon runner Phil Shin. Phil opens up about his battle with liver cancer that eventually led to him having a transplant, the mental and physical challenges that came with those moments, and how he's benefited from life-saving surgery. He also tells me how his training's been going ahead of running a 50km race and the 2022 Boston Marathon. If you'd like to donate to Phil's Boston Marathon fundraiser for the American Liver Foundation, the link is in the show notes and I'm sure Phil would appreciate any donations. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure you press subscribe or follow wherever you normally listen so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to follow the podcast on social media, all the links will be in the show notes. Before we get into this episode, I'd like to say another huge thank you to Neon Cricket, who very kindly sponsored me once again for the 2022 season, and have given me a code to share with you all that's slightly different to the one you may have heard before. If you use the code TTOSPORT, you'll receive a 20% discount on their entire range. That's TTOSPORT for 20% off everything at neoncricket.co.uk, and the website and the code are in the show notes in case you want to go straight from there to the website. I've been using their kit and it's genuinely the best I've ever used, so if you play cricket, why not grab yourself a saving of 20% ready for the new season. If there's a friend, family member, teammate, opposition player, a player you coach, or anyone else you'd like to share the code with, then please feel free to do so. Thank you once again to Neon Cricket, and let's get back to the podcast. Series 2 is here. It's been a little while since the last episode of Series 1. That was in the end of November of 2021. We're now in February 2022 at the time of recording, and Series 2 is basically the same as Series 1, really, similar to the last couple of episodes anyway, the only difference being that there's been a bit of time between the two. If you're wondering why there's been a bit of time, there's a video on the Instagram highlights at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, but basically I picked up a collection of colds over the festive period and over winter, and December, January, Christmas, New Year, it can be quite difficult to book guests because everyone's busy, I get busier, and everything's going on that time of year. But we're back, ready to go, hopefully with you every 2 weeks. And the first guest of Series 2 is here with me now, Phil Shin. Welcome to Transplants Take on Sport.
Hi, Lewis. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited to get to know you and your audience. Did a little bit of research, and I believe I'm probably the first American
I would
on
say
your show.
so.
Yeah, but I must, I guess, defend myself a bit. I actually did I did live in the UK for 3 years back in the early 2000s, and in fact, my only son, was born in the UK as well. So I feel like
Nice.
I do have some alignment, with our special neighbors across the pond. So I do feel like I'm a bit back at home, having this opportunity to chat with you.
Hopefully not the last American to come on. I'm hoping to be more as the episodes go on.
Definitely, yeah. So it's an honor to be here. So thank you.
No worries. You are a liver transplant recipient, and you've been through quite a lot over the years, which we're going to come on to later. I'm sure I'll have said something in the intro about it. But before we talk about your liver transplant, you've got a couple of exciting events coming up. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that and how your prep's going, how your preparations are going for those?
Yeah. It's going to be a pretty busy year. I qualified for the Boston Marathon just this past October, and typically the Boston Marathon is run every spring in April, but because of COVID, they delayed it to October. And now things are kind of, getting somewhat back to normal. They decided to have the 2022 Boston Marathon back in its normal scheduled time, which is in the spring, which unfortunately means that I only have 6 months to train between the 2021 Boston Marathon in October to the 2022 Boston Marathon in April. And then on top of that, we thought my coach and I would just add a little bit of challenge by dropping a 50K ultra trail run in the about 6 weeks before the Boston Marathon. So yeah. So didn't really think at all, I guess, about the scheduling components to this, but there it is. It's just running. Hopefully, things will sort itself out, and I imagine I'll be quite fit for the Boston Marathon. It's really just about how much legs I have left by the time I get to the start line for that race.
It'll seem like a walk in the park after you did a 50K.
I would hope so, but again, I think it just kind of depends on how the day goes when I do that 50K. So, but yes, stay tuned, and I'll let you. You'll be one of the first to know as soon as I cross that finish line in Boston in April.
How is your training going for it? And if you had to adapt in any way because of your liver transplant?
Surprisingly, no, I've not had any. I've not had to do anything, I guess, alternative because of my post-transplant life. Obviously, the big difference for me is the immunosuppressants that I'm on. So I'm on quite a number of pills, but I'm typically taking those pills during the day and into the early evening. So by the time I wake up in the morning, which is normally when I run, the evening meds would have worn off. So, because I'm just going off for a run by myself, I feel
Yeah.
quite safe. So it's not like I'm going to be exposed to, even in the middle of a pandemic, when I'm running out at 4:30 in the morning. Usually there's nobody outside, so I can feel pretty safe about not catching anything or being exposed to any germs or bacteria. So because of that, I also don't have to bother with the side effects that come with the immunosuppressants that I'm on. So I'm actually able to feel quite normal and, run to my full capabilities, which, it's not that fast, but still being able to go for a run and, perform a workout without having to feel just the side effects and, the dizziness and the fatigue from the immunosuppressants is quite helpful.
So we're about a couple of months away now from the Boston Marathon. How are you starting to build up the distance of your runs now? How close do you get to doing a full marathon before the event?
Yeah, typically the most you would want to run is about 22 miles as your longest run. But I don't really look at it by individual runs. I actually look at it the aggregate total mileage during the week. And my coach will typically get me up to about 65 to 70 miles a week. So, and that's what we did for the 2021 Boston Marathon. So I imagine we'll do the same for this next buildup. But again, because of the close proximity between the two marathons, um, I've already built up a level of fitness where we probably don't need to build up the mileage as high as we did
Yeah.
before. So it's really just kind of carrying over that fitness that I'd attained from this past October and just leveraging it for pretty much the same workouts that I've done because I did pretty well at the 2021 Boston Marathon, and I don't have any big aspirations to run it much faster than that. Maybe a little bit, but not a whole lot where I have to drastically change our entire training plan. So
How quickly did you do it?
I did it in 3 hours and 23 minutes. So
Nice.
I was
Yeah,
only
you.
about 3 minutes off my intended finishing time, but that's what 2022 is for. So we'll have another whack at it and see how it goes.
As well as training, I'm sure a lot of people listening who may be interested in running a marathon themselves or are into running would want to know, alongside training, what do you eat during training and then on the day of the marathon to get you through it?
Yeah, yeah. And as a transplant patient, obviously, I would definitely suggest that you talk about your nutritional advice directly with your medical team. So I was making sure that I would run, you know, uh, I would have conversations with my nutritionist as well as my transplant doctor about what I can and can't eat. And because of the immunosuppressants I'm on, it's actually elevated certain areas of my blood, particularly like my potassium levels are quite
Yeah.
high, right? And usually when you think about running, right, oh, I need to go have a banana or something, right? Well,
Yeah.
I actually can't eat a banana, right? So because it'll elevate my potassium levels. So, but there are a number of options in terms of nutrition for running that it actually has nothing to even bother with the transplant life. So obviously you want to have your proteins, you want to limit your fat intake, but you don't want to eliminate the fat because you can actually use your fat for energy stores. So having a bit of fat in your diet is actually quite good. So, and then during a workout, during a run, you want to take in sugars for that little boost of energy that you might need, and obviously your electrolytes and your water. So, not a whole lot different as a transplant recipient versus just someone who's trying to, run a marathon or a half marathon. It's actually quite the same. But as a transplant recipient on immunosuppression, I need to be very mindful of what I do eat, just because I don't want it to conflict with the medication that I'm on.
Of course, it's always best to work that out and have a chat with your doctor beforehand. They'll know you best. You may even see a dietitian or nutritionist. I know
Yeah,
over here with the dietitians at all the hospitals,
yeah,
or a lot of
yeah,
the
yeah.
hospitals, should I say? I don't want to group them all together.
Right, right. In fact, I think the first person I met post transplant was my nutritionist, because I mean, I have pages and pages of recommendations of what I can and cannot eat, and it's quite a lot. So, yeah. So, but I'm 2 years, just over 2 years post transplant now, so I'm quite used to it now. So,
You had yours at a very similar time to me. We're
oh
not,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
noticed we're not far up. We're only a couple of months off
mm,
each other. Different
yeah,
transplants,
yeah.
similar sort of time.
Right, right, right. So, yeah, yeah. So we'll have the same transplant birthdays, I suppose. Yeah,
They're very, very close.
yeah.
Now, there's a largely a UK audience with this podcast. There's definitely some in the US and from other places around the world. Now, I'm more familiar with the London Marathon, and I've never done it, but the qualification from the other people I've spoken to is done through a ballot. How do you
Mm.
qualify for the Boston Marathon?
For the Boston Marathon, it's just two ways, honestly. It's you can qualify for it, which is the primary way, but then they also set aside. So it's the field is about 30,000 runners, and I would say just over 20,000 is for those who qualified by time, right? So, and I believe in the UK they call it good for age, right? So that type of qualification. So for based on your age and your gender, there's a certain qualifying time that you must meet, right? And then another way is by going in through charity. And I actually did run London in 2019 for charity. So I had the pleasure of running the Boston Marathon. I'm sorry, the London Marathon with a UK charity called Tommy's, and they actually support families who have experienced the pain and stress of preterm births and miscarriages. So, and that was quite a meaningful charity for my family, because our son, who was born in the UK, was actually born as he was born prematurely. In fact, he was born at 25 weeks, which was
Wow.
just over 3 months premature. So to be able to run for that charity that was so meaningful, and to run the London Marathon for that, it was just a spectacular opportunity and an experience that me and my family will never forget. In fact, I'm quite good friends with a number of folks from that Tommy's charity team from the London Marathon. So just an extraordinary event for us.
What a great cause to do it for as well.
Yeah, certainly.
Now, the London Marathon, Boston Marathon, as far as I'm aware, they're both road based. The 50K that you're doing in March, I know there's some
Hmm.
of those that are up hills and mountains. Is that what sort of terrain is that on?
That is on trail, so it's primarily dirt, and the area that the race is, that typically this time of year, it's actually quite wet, so we expect it to be quite muddy. So it it'll very much feel like a UK based trail race. So yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm quite excited about that.
Do you have a certain time you like to aim for in that one?
No, no. I think I'm gonna have to be somewhat responsible, just because I do have a time goal in mind for the Boston Marathon.
Yeah,
So I want to make sure I don't go out too hard, right? I want to make sure I don't particularly injure myself, right? But at the same time, I do want to give it a good go, right? So just
definitely.
to see what I'm capable of doing. So yeah, so that's what the plan is, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. Because if it turns out that it's getting to be a little bit too strenuous, a little bit too difficult, then I'll just pull back, right? If I have to walk, I'll walk, right? So there's no there isn't, a limitation in terms of when you can finish. But if I
Yeah.
could finish, let's say anywhere within 6 hours, I'll be quite happy.
Managing yourself getting through it because you know you've got that other race coming up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Now going right back to the start, before your transplant, before your liver failure, liver diagnosis, when did your love for running begin?
Ooh, well, it definitely didn't start out as a love for it. So, it started way back in the year 2000. So that year I was turning 30. I just probably gave up my age. So I'm not a young one like yourself, but so in 2000 I was turning 30, and that particular year I wanted to do something significant with my life, right? So, and I wasn't a very smart person, so I just happened to be flipping through the newspaper, and I saw that the Los Angeles Marathon was happening that weekend, right? Well, I found out on the Tuesday, right? So on the Wednesday, on the Wednesday, I signed up for the marathon. Yeah, so I had never run. I had only played sport up until that point, and the only sport I really played was baseball, right? So not a whole lot of running involved in baseball. So but I thought, okay, well, marathon, I'm turning 30. That'd be a pretty nice thing to kind of like put a stamp on being 30, right? So didn't know what I was doing, but certainly I just went ahead and I signed up for it. I turned up on the day. That particular day, you probably know that it doesn't rain very much here in Los Angeles, but that particular day we got just over 3 inches of rain. So it was
Well, that's a
one of the
lot.
wettest. Yeah, it was one of the wettest marathons on record. So I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't wearing a particular running shirt. I was just wearing a cotton t-shirt. I was wearing, some cross trainers, and, just there's a rule when it comes to like marathon running. They say don't do anything new as you train and build up to that marathon. Just don't introduce anything new, right? Well, the problem was because I hadn't done any training. Everything for me was new that day, so I had no idea what I was doing. But yeah, sure enough, the start gun went off. We went, and there's another saying when marathon running that there's this concept of the wall, right? That's
Yeah.
that one point in the marathon where you just depleted all of your energy. You just don't have the will to live anymore. And usually that happens around mile 20. Well, for myself, it happened around mile 4.
It's
And
a
I
big
still have,
wall. It's a
yeah,
thick wall.
yeah, it's a big, long wall. And it was just wall after wall for the next 22 miles. So, yeah, so that certainly made it a very interesting day, but still managed to finish in 6 hours, which looking back on it, it's actually pretty impressive
With no
considering I
training.
hadn't done, yeah, with no training. Yeah. So I, I definitely was not planning on doing it again. I was like, okay, look, I've done it. I'm turning 30, and we can move on with my life filled with beer and fried foods and all that. Yeah. So, so after that, I put running fully behind me. And then this is when we actually moved to the UK. Yeah, and then so I used to work for Nestle's, and Nestle, they were based in Croydon at the time. So while living in Croydon, I had gotten to become friends with a number of other British British folks on my team. So they had invited me to join their lunchtime run. So, and I thought it would be, I really enjoyed their company. So I said, sure, I'd be happy to join you for a run. And we just, lunchtime, we just change and we just go for a little stroll around Lloyd Park, which is right next to the office. And I actually quite enjoyed it, and I never hated, running. I actually quite look for. I was always looking forward to it every day. So before you know it, I was actually like really enjoying it. So 3 years pass, we come back to the US, and then I'm flipping through the newspaper again. And again, this time I see that, hey, the LA Marathon will be coming back, and this time I thought, okay, if I train for it and I know, I do what I know about running, and I put that into my training, then it actually, maybe I can do better than the 6 hours I did, just 5 years ago, right? So this time I trained for it. I did, all the steps that you would need to take, in following a marathon training plan. And I ran that marathon in 5 hours. So to knock an hour off, I was
Good,
actually quite
very
chuffed.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. I was pretty chuffed about that. I said, wow. And not only that, but I didn't at any point in that race feel like dying, I guess, right? So I finished it. I had a proper quality, finishing photo with my hands up in the air. So at that point, then I said, well, now I feel like I can make this like a part of my life. And then since then, I've actually gone on and run quite regularly, and I've run, I believe, 24 marathons since
Wow,
since
you've
that
really got the
first
bug.
marathon. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Quite honestly, I did get that bug, and to not only see my time consistently improve as my finishing times to consistently get lower as my age goes upward. It's actually quite it's quite satisfying
It's a great
to see
story, great
that.
achievement.
Yeah, yeah. But then on top of that, just being able to meet all the amazing people that I've met, through the running community has just kind of like now fully integrated, that into my life. So it's been wonderful.
That story it's a perfect example of if you want to do something, just do it. But you saw the marathon and it was in a few days' time. You just did it, and
Exactly.
and look what you're doing now. You've ran so many since then.
Yeah, but I definitely wouldn't recommend to anybody to just, hey, turn up turn up for the marathon on the day without any training. That's not something that I would. I mean, yeah, that you hear about people saying, "What would you tell your younger self?" I think the first thing I would tell is like, if you're gonna run a marathon, give yourself enough time to actually train for it. So,
Moving on from running,
mm,
your story with liver failure is quite it's a whirlwind. I don't like the word roller coaster, the term roller coaster, but it is. Uh, when did you first find out that something was wrong with your liver?
yeah, so this would have been in 2018, and to be honest, Lewis, I didn't think anything was wrong. So what's unusual is that despite having being diagnosed with liver cancer, I'd never been symptomatic, but um, by then I was turning 48 now, and now you kind of reach that age where you need to be pretty you have to be very intentional about going to your physician to get to get examined. And I wasn't very good at that, right? I just felt like, okay, look, I'm a regular runner. I eat well. I do all the things that I feel like I should be doing, to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So I was actually pretty bad at, going in for my annual visit with the doctor. But this particular year, I actually had to because my son, the one who was born prematurely, um, he as a result of his unfortunate start in life, he has a hearing impairment, so he requires hearing aids. So the hearing aids can get quite expensive, and at the time, the insurance that I had didn't really properly cover enough of the cost of his hearing aid. So
Right.
we were exploring some other options. So unlike the NHS where pretty much everything's covered over here, we actually have to have insurance to pay
Yeah.
for this $5,000 device to help him hear normally. So going back to my work, I took a look and I found that we actually did have an insurance policy that fully subsidized the cost of his hearing aid. So we had to switch insurance, which means I had to switch doctors. So I had to visit that doctor in order to get the insurance. So I went to the doctor and I uh, said, okay, look, this is the first time I'm meeting you, with introduction. And then he asked me about my health history. And then I knew that my family had a history of hepatitis. Okay, so it was passed down from my mother, and I knew that I had it. I knew my brother had it, but I was completely fine. I was never symptomatic. But he said, well, let's go ahead and just run some tests on you, right? Specifically for the liver, just to make sure that, things are okay. I said, okay, fine. So went in, had some blood drawn. And this was just about a month after I had run the 2018 LA marathon. Yeah. So again, I was feeling just fine. And I was continuing to run, and I was actually trying to start building up my fitness to qualify for the Boston Marathon one day. So a week later, after I take the blood test, he called me back in, and he sees evidence of a tumor in my liver. Right, so he sees that the protein levels are quite high. So if you have any liver cancer listeners, they're probably quite familiar with this. It's called the AFP marker. Right, it's a tumor marker. Normally, that marker for normal it's like 0 to 8. On the point scale, mine was over 5,000.
Wow.
So So he said, this looks like it's a tumor, but we don't know if it's cancerous or not. So why don't we go ahead and schedule you in for an ultrasound to actually take a physical look at it, right? So we scheduled the ultrasound, and sure enough, he found they discovered, a mass about the size of a racquetball. So it's just about the size of a tennis ball. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they said this could still be benign. We don't know. So let's go ahead and schedule you in for an MRI to have an even closer look. Yeah. And they definitely confirmed that, okay, this is definitely a tumor, but we're not sure yet if it's cancerous. So let's go ahead and schedule you in for a CT scan. So by now, a CT scan, that's where you actually have the radiation pumping through
Yeah.
you, right? So, and it was a very, very, very uncomfortable test. And this is when I just kind of hit us that, okay, this is probably something quite serious now.
Mm.
The fact that they're investing so much effort into understanding what this is inside of me. So after that CT scan, they had me come back to the doctor, and this time it wasn't just meeting with the doctor. Now I was meeting with a hepatologist, the liver doctor, as well as a liver surgeon. And this is when they broke the news to me that I had liver cancer and that we needed to remove this cancerous tumor from my liver immediately.
How did you deal with that mentally, knowing that? Because I think I can full I m I didn't have cancer, but mine was, IgA nephropathy in the kidneys. But there's that moment where you think, like you said, there's something going on here, something when all the doctors are there.
Yeah,
How do you deal with that diagnosis mentally?
it was very, I mean, yeah, it was quite shocking, obviously, but I was honestly really confused. I was very, very confused because you always have this picture of what cancer means, right? Cancer means that you're suffering, right?
Yeah.
You're needing chemo, you're quite weak, you're not able to do normal things. Well, as a runner, I was still running, right? I was still doing the things that I enjoyed doing, and I was doing them quite well, which I guess is good and bad, right?
Was that after you'd been diagnosed?
That was after I'd been diagnosed. Yeah. So they imagined that this tumor had been with me for a while, and they did say it's quite possible that because of your health and your fitness through running, it was actually able to manage
Mhm.
the effects of this cancer in you. We don't know yet. We really don't know, but certainly they were quite concerned about the size of this cancer in me. But to have all this flooded, all this information flooding to me and my wife, from three different doctors, we were just honestly stunned, and we didn't know what to do. And honestly, we didn't even have time to react. They they were right then and there were scheduling, us for surgery. Will you
Right.
be available in 3 weeks for us to get this removed from you? Sure. I'll have to have a chat with my manager at work. But yeah, it's cancer, so I guess yeah, we'll go ahead and do it. But honestly, I was still thinking, okay, how's this going to affect my running? What am I going to be able to do? What am I going to be? I honestly didn't even know how to think about it, right? Because there isn't really a playbook to
No.
follow, right, when it comes to cancer, right? So you just kind of had to put your trust into the team to say, okay, look, this is the best course of action to remove the cancer from you. And this is actually when I remember asking the question, okay, if you're going to remove a third of my liver, because they said that that was going to be the surgical approach to remove the cancer, from me, I immediately asked, well, what is that going to do to my liver? Like, what am I, what are the drawbacks of removing, a third of my liver? And they said, oh, well, you should know that the liver is the only organ that actually regenerates. So what we cut out will actually grow back, and it'll grow back to full size, and it will function normally. So again, we just kind of took their word for it, and we said, okay, then this is essentially a no-brainer. Let's just go ahead and get
Yeah.
it done. Yeah. So 3 weeks later, I went in for surgery, and the surgery went extremely well. The surgery itself, it only took a few hours, less than half a day, to get that removed from me. And then I was discharged from the hospital 3 to 4 days later, and back at work in a month, and then running again. So
Do you think your existing level of fitness helped you a lot in dealing with the physical effects of cancer?
Certainly. In fact, the my medical team mentioned that to me a number of times because when I came in with a certain level of fitness because typically someone with liver cancer, right? Usually it's because of poor health, right? I mean, some people are unlucky, like like myself, where I had hepatitis, and that uh, as a result, I developed cancer from it. But others, typically you develop liver cancer through a liver disease called cirrhosis, right? And cirrhosis is when you're just doing a lot of damage to your liver, right? Whether it's from drinking, whether it's from drugs, whether it's from smoking, obesity. That's another common cause for cirrhosis, right? So usually there's a slow trajectory to get to liver cancer,
Yeah.
right? But in my case, I kind of jumped that queue altogether and went straight to cancer because I had hepatitis. Yeah. So when I walked into uh, the liver clinic, right, I looked around. I just saw all these extremely sick people, right? So they were quite frail. They were in wheelchairs. They were on oxygen. I mean, I remember this one lady. She had these two big clear bags just filled with liver medication, right? And meanwhile, I'm walking in. I had just completed a marathon. I'm in my trainers, I'm in my running jumper, and I everybody's just kind of looking at me, thinking, "Well, are you here to pick up your mom or what?" I said, "No, no, I'm like you. I have liver disease. I have liver cancer." So that was quite a shock. But because of my fitness, to answer your question, Melissa, is because of my health and my fitness, I was actually able to recover from that surgery quite quickly, and my liver was able to recover very quickly as well. Again, just because of my general good health. So, so I honestly, to circle back, have to thank running for giving me the opportunity to overcome, the liver cancer, at least the first go of it, right? Because I was able to recover from it so quickly. And again, they did say that had I not been in such good health, I could have had a much different outcome, where I would look like some of those people, in that waiting room. Yeah,
It shows how much sport and exercise, fitness really does help in other areas of your life that you may not expect it to. If
yeah,
if the
yeah.
worst does happen and you're diagnosed with a serious illness.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and then I would say also that because of my health and fitness and desire to want to get running again, it accelerated my recovery as well, right? Because typically, when a liver cancer patient undergoes that same surgery, they're usually in hospital for about a week. But I got out in like 3 to 4 days. And again, it was just because of my health that I was able to recover so quickly and get back to, just my normal daily life. So and they said that, usually I would have expected to not return to work for about 2 to 3 months, but I returned to work in a month. So, and all of that's
Great
just
recovery.
due to my general, yeah, it's all just due to my general good health at the time.
Now you mentioned it in there. Unfortunately, the cancer came back again. How long was it before that happened?
It was just, yeah, my cancer returned about 5 months after that surgery. Yeah. And what's interesting is that after the after the first surgery, a good mate of mine, a running mate of mine, he bought me a registration for a marathon in October. My surgery was in May, but the marathon was in October, and I don't think he really had any real intention of me running it, and I certainly didn't, right? Because I didn't know what I'd be capable of doing, right? But he got it to me just really, I think, more as a way to motivate me to get running again as soon as I can, as long as it was safe,
Yeah.
right? So I laughed. I said, "Okay, you could have gotten me a card, you could have gotten me some flowers, but okay, a marathon registration, sure, why not?" But I ended up running that marathon in October because I was able to recover so quickly, right? And on top of that, I after all these years of trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon, in that October marathon, just 5 months
Yeah.
after my first surgery, I managed to qualify for the Boston Marathon without even really trying. I wasn't really training for it. It just kind of happened. So it was just one of those real surreal moments in life where you can't really explain how it happened. It just kind of happened. And I still can't really explain it, even though that was, over 3 years ago. But, yeah. So, but despite having had a massive recovery and ability to, thrive after that first surgery, I was called back into my liver doctor's office to share the news with me that my cancer had returned.
Mentally, is that harder to deal with than the first one? Because obviously you could tell how determined you are through that marathon that you ran 5 months after your surgery. How hard does it hit you when you're told it's back?
Oh, no, it was gutting. It was absolutely gutting. Uh, to be able to really, I was told consistently by my medical team that I was, you're never free from cancer, but the feedback I was getting from my medical team was that I had recovered so beautifully that, this should be behind me, right? But we'll continue to monitor you. But yeah, you should be able to do everything that you want to do and more. But so I went in with that mindset, right? That I'm going to be just fine. Everything's going to be great. But to get hit with that news, and I remember, when because this was when I met to get that news, I had actually not seen the doctor after that marathon. This is my first time seeing the doctor after the marathon. So I actually brought my medal with me to just let him know, hey, look what I just did, right? Not only did I run a marathon, but I just qualified for the Boston Marathon. So I started the meeting by telling him that, and then he said, "Oh, that's fantastic, but we actually need to have a chat right
Yeah.
now, a serious chat." And then that's when he showed me. So to come in with, the expectation to just, have a laugh, a celebratory moment, it all just kind of came tumbling down with the news that, I had a recurrence of my cancer. So yeah, it just imagine, yeah, it's just another one of those things I just can't really put into words, how gutting that moment was for me and my family.
Was there anything that made you more determined and more motivated to overcome it for the second time?
um yeah, I it took me a while, and the reason why is because when uh he shared the news with me that my cancer had returned, I'd asked him, okay, what are our treatment options? Are we going to have the same surgery as last time to remove this smaller tumor that developed in my liver? And then this is when we got the really difficult news that, surgery was actually no longer an option for us. They said surgery's off the table for you now. We now need to get you listed for a transplant. That that's your only curative option now. So um, we had no experience with transplant. We had no idea what this was. So he just said, you now need to go to the liver transplant clinic, right, and meet with that team, one to go through the process of getting me listed, right, and then sit there and wait for a transplant. So there was, before I could even think about being motivated to do something, right, it was really just trying to educate ourselves in what this transplant world was, because we had no idea, right? So, obviously there are different options, for getting an organ transplant, right? But us going in, all we were familiar with is, okay, we need to wait for somebody to die, right,
Yeah.
to receive their healthy liver, right? Um, there was just a flood of information. Again, it was just that same. It was like that last, the first meeting we had with our medical team, where we had the transplant surgeon, or we had the liver surgeon, we had the liver doctor, and my doctor. Same thing. Now we had a transplant doctor, we had a transplant coordinator, we had my liver doctor there. So just a flood of information is now coming our way, and I definitely remember them telling me that because of my health and fitness and my age, I would be at the very bottom of the list, right? And they also said that realistically, you'd be looking at a minimum of maybe 3 years before you could receive a transplant from a deceased donor. So
That's a long
we,
time. And
yeah,
there's a lot of scare the transplant conversation is quite a scary one. There's a lot of information to take in all at once. It takes a while to get your head around it, doesn't it?
oh, absolutely. And unlike the previous time when, I had my first surgery, where we said, okay, just tell us what you need and we'll go. This time we now needed to, we just kind of let them guide us into, what we needed to do. But this time we actually had to figure out, what our options were, right? So them telling us that, to receive a cadaveric uh, liver transplant, um, taking 3 years, that then we said, okay, well then that means I have to live with this cancer in me for 3 years. And, that could that could turn into a very bad situation
Yeah.
where, a liver transplant, I could actually find myself getting unlisted or delisted, from transplant because now I've got cancer elsewhere in my body, right? So
Yeah.
a transplant would no longer benefit me. So this is when we learned about the living donor option. Yeah. So this is where we found out that, okay, we can actually reach out to my family, my friends, and my colleagues to donate a portion of their liver to replace my cancerous liver. So that's something that took us a while to get understanding around as well, because how do you even craft an email to say, hey,
Yeah.
this is my situation. Would you mind, blocking some time on your calendar to come to the hospital with me to have a portion of your healthy liver removed? Yeah. So it took us probably a good 2 to 3 months to really get a handle on what we were dealing with before we finally sent out that first email to everyone we felt would be interested in becoming a potential liver donor candidate.
Before we come to that, I just wanted to touch on something that you mentioned there, and I listened to another podcast that you did and watched the documentary that you made with the LA Marathon. And you said that you were virtually too healthy to go higher up on the waiting list for a deceased donor. I'd never come across that before. What's the reasoning behind that?
The reasoning behind that is because to get listed um, uh, near the top of the list, um, it's basically based on points, right? So it's called a Meld score. I don't know if they have this in the UK, but here in the US, and it's part of the UNOS, which is the United Network of Organs something. I forgot what the S is. Anyway, but there's actually a point system. So there is a formula that determines, based on your health, not so much on your age, but basically on the health and condition of your liver, that will calculate a score. So you are assigned a score, and that score can go up as high as, I believe, as high as in the 40s. And if you're in the 40s, that means you are in hospital, you are in intensive care, you are near death, right? Um, when they ran the calculation for me, right, based on the health of because despite having cancer in my liver, it was still actually quite a healthy liver. It was still
Yeah.
functioning, but the problem was that there was cancer in it. And because the liver is a vascular organ, the risk is that with blood flowing in and out of it, right, that cancer can spread elsewhere in my
Hmm.
body.
Yeah.
It could spread to my chest. It could spread to my bones. So the concern was that because the concern, I guess, from my side, not so much on my medical team side, is that because I was so healthy and my liver was so healthy, um, we were too low. So the scale is in the upper 40s, mid to upper 40s. I was on the very bottom of that scale,
Right.
and my score came out to, I believe, 6.
Ah.
so so 6 is at the very bottom of the list, and based on what they had shared with us, you're probably looking at 3 years. Well, living with cancer for 3 years can mean
Yeah.
so many different things. So we just assumed that getting a deceased donor liver was not an option for us because we weren't willing to wait 3 years uh, with cancer living inside of me. So this is when they shared with us the option of having a living organ donor,
Yeah.
right? And then that's when we started going through the thought process of how we would, one, identify who'd be a potential match in terms of like who would be interested, and then how we would actually communicate that out to,
So you'd mentioned you'd sent an email out, or no, you eventually drafted an email, sent it out to a few people. Did you get several people coming forward who said they'd be willing to donate a part of their liver to you?
Yeah, what's interesting about the process here in the U.S. is that um, they actually isolate the recipient from the donor. So we are not allowed to know who has submitted themselves as a
Right.
donor, right, and where they are in the process of the evaluation.
Okay.
So I'm completely isolated. Not only am I isolated, but my liver team, my physician, my coordinator, they're completely isolated as well because they do not want any crossover where that would create a situation of, a conflict of interest. Yeah. So the concern is that if let's just say I'm in like declining health, right? They don't want anybody from my team or my family to try and influence somebody we know
Right.
who's being evaluated into a rush decision, right? So it's by design why we have no idea. But I did eventually find out that 16 people had submitted
Oh
themselves
wow.
as a candidate. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it was quite a stressful period, in our lives, just because we had no idea. I mean, we know now that there was 16, but at the time, we it could have been nobody, right? So
Do the donors or potential donors come forward almost altruistically to say, "I'd like to donate my liver to someone"? Like with my kidney transplant, members of my family came forward and said that to the transplant coordinator at the hospital that I was at, that they would like to donate one of their kidneys to me.
mhm.
In the system that you went through, is it just people come forward, say, "I'd like to donate a liver," but they're not sure who it would go to?
No, no,
That is for
it's the
you.
same. It's the same as you. Yeah.
Yeah,
So how it works is there's an online questionnaire, right? So there's an online questionnaire. So we would just send the link, in that email, right? And then you would just enter my name as the intended recipient, as the named
yeah.
recipient.
Ah,
Yeah, and
okay.
that link is with the hospital that I'm currently listed at for transplants. So that's how it works. But there's also an option where you can donate altruistically. And I have a couple of friends that I've made, through this process who have donated altruistically, which is just blows my mind that, someone would do something like
Yeah.
that. But, God bless them. The more people we have like that in this world, the far better we would be.
If anyone would like to find out more information on that, I believe in the show notes of the last episode of series 1 with Jade Carr, there's a few links in the show notes that take you to, I think it's the NHS altruistic kidney donor, information. So if you'd like to check that out, that's in the previous episode show notes.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic. And even if you're not interested in doing it, yeah, at least educate yourself. That way, if you know somebody who's interested in doing something like this, you can share it with them, right? So yeah, it's just such. I mean, gosh, it is like one of the most beautiful gestures a human can do, right? To actually give life to someone,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Because it's just something that words cannot quite explain, what a beautiful thing it is to
Hmm.
do something like that. So yeah, yeah. But we sent out the email, and obviously my immediate family, they submitted themselves, but in terms of like who was the best candidate, there's a number of key items that need to be met uh, to qualify. One is obviously the blood type. Yeah. Two would be the general health of the person, right? You want to be in good health. That way, we know that, or they know that you'll be able to survive the surgery because it's a very, very
Yeah.
serious surgery, right? And then three, it's your age. I believe here in the U.S., the requirements, you have to be under the age of 60. I'm not sure what it is in the U.K., but here it's under the age of 60.
I think I don't quote me on this, but I think it varies. There's sort of a we were told that there's a sort of an unwritten cut-off point, whereas if somebody's older and healthier, I think they can still do it. But again, don't quote me
Mm,
on that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical expert. All the
yeah.
information will be online somewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's how it was. But I mean, it was just great to know that we had so many people submit themselves. But it did take us just over 6 months to get confirmation, of that donor. So in the meantime, I did the only thing that I could control, which was honestly, my running.
Yeah.
I was still fortunate to have my health, but mentally and emotionally, I would say I was struggling quite a bit just because of the unknown, and also while knowing that I still had cancer inside of me. Yeah, so that was just an extremely frustrating time, for me and my family. There were some moments where I was quite depressed, but I had running to kind of keep me sane and kind of keep me in the present. So there's that. Honestly, I would say running again, just like it had done with my physical health, it had done so much magic for me and my mental health during this process of transplant.
It's a process and a time that no one ever wants to go through. But it sounds like you, as hard as it was, you found your ways to get through it mentally, physically. And that day did come where you found a donor, your friend. Do you remember the moment that you found out your friend was going to donate part of their liver
I
scheme?
did, I did, and it's quite funny. There's a number of funny elements to this. His name is Mark. He's a friend of mine for well over 20 years now, and we have a mutual friend who's actually my best friend. Um, we would communicate, the three of us, via text. So, because Mark lives in Portland, Oregon, I'm here in Los Angeles, and our mutual friend Eric, at the time he was in Illinois near Chicago. So geographically, we were very, very far apart, but we were connected via our mobiles and just texting each other. Yeah. So, and what was great during this process is that, we never really talked about my health situation, right? They were my mates, and we just talked about just nonsense, right? The same nonsense that you would have with your
Yeah.
closest mates. And it was just fantastic because it gave me my escape. It gave me that sense of normalcy in my life, right? So I had more than enough people asking about my health situation, but to have these two really good friends just talk nonsense about film, about whiskey, about what have you. It was great. So one day. Uh, in August of 2019. And by then, this would have been 6 months after we sent out that email. Yeah. So I had no idea that, Mark and Eric had submitted themselves. I never asked them, and in those 6 months, they never let me know that they had submitted themselves. But via this text exchange out of nowhere, right? Because we never talked about my health.
Hmm.
Mark asked, "Hey, what's the latest with your liver donor situation?" And I was a little surprised. And I said, "We never talk about that," but I was happy to respond. I just said, "Well, honestly, I nothing. Nobody's told me anything. We did hear that people are being evaluated, but we don't know who is being evaluated, where they were in the evaluation process. But other than that, we have no idea." So Mark responds back to that. He goes, "Well, that's funny because they told me that they wouldn't let me know that you knew about me until they told you." And I never talked about the process with them, right? And I just responded back, "What are you talking about?" This makes no sense to me. And Mark responded back, and he said, um, "I'm the donor, bitch."
What a story.
Best text ever. And again, this that kind of gives you the context of our relationship, right? We're always having a laugh. And of course, he would make a reference to, one of our favorite shows, Breaking Bad. That's a Jesse Pinkman line where he's always saying bitch. So he says, "I'm the donor, bitch." And naturally, I just started laughing, right? I was just laughing. And then a second later, it just hit me. It's like, oh my God, Mark's gonna save my life.
Yeah.
Mark's my donor. And just like a tsunami, it just hit me out of nowhere, and I just started crying. The emotions of it were just completely overwhelming, and I dropped the phone, and I ran to my wife and told her the news that, Mark was going to be our donor. And then we started crying, and I didn't even realize that I still hadn't responded to Mark's text, him revealing himself as a donor. So, after a few minutes, I run back. I said, "Oh wait, I dropped the phone. Let me pick it up." And there's Mark responding, "Hello." So maybe we should talk about this. And then I responded, "I'm sorry, we're still crying over here." So just just a magical moment that, we'll never, again, there's just been so many moments in my life that I've been blessed to say that I can't explain how that happened, or, I can't put into words, how I felt. And that was definitely one of those moments. So,
It's a special, special moment between two close friends. And has it brought you even closer?
oh, definitely, definitely. And I'll tell you, there's another little funny story if you have a moment I'd like to share.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Mark, he wasn't the fittest guy. Yeah. I mean, he's a guy in his late 40s, just like me. Our birthdays are actually just a week apart. Yeah. So, um, out of nowhere, he would text me questions about running, right? And, being fit, because I was apparently the only runner he really knew. So he would text me saying, "Hey, I want some advice on how to get running," and I would respond just saying, "What are you talking about? You don't run, right? Why do you want to run?" He goes, "Well, I'm at that age now where I probably should start thinking about my health and my fitness." And so I was happy to. I was happy to help him. So I said, "Well, why don't you just try and go out for a 1 mile jog and walk if you have to, but just slowly build up, right? And see if this is something that you enjoy." So over the next, 2 to 3 months, he kept like asking me little questions about, "Oh, what about my heart rate? What kind of watch should I get?" Yeah. So, uh, and I was quite excited for him because, my best friends are, running friends, right? So to have Mark be a part of that, I was really, really pleased for him. Well, it turned out that there was a reason why I was doing this, and it's because while he was being evaluated, yeah, his transplant team said, "Look, you are the ideal candidate. I mean, you and Phil are the same age, you're the same size, you are basically a clone of Phil, and your liver is just the ideal match. There is one condition we do have if you want to move forward with this. We need you to be in better health." So he was a little bit out of shape at the time. So they said, if you could just drop, 20 to 30 pounds, yeah, then you'll be the ideal candidate, and we have no issues or no concerns at all about you surviving the surgery. Well, again, Mark didn't know any runners, right? He didn't, but he just felt like, okay, running is probably the best way to do this.
Yeah.
So why don't I just call the one runner I know who also happens to be the man whose life I'm going to be saving? So without revealing to me that he was going to be my donor, he was asking me questions about running so he can be prepared to be my donor. So yeah,
Wow.
that was just amazing how this all kind of came full circle. Again, all back to running. Yeah. So just so much to be thankful, to running in this. So yeah, to answer your question, Mark has continued with running, and we were just about to share the news on National Donor Day. So in February, it's February 14, which is Valentine's Day. It's also National Donor Day here in the U.S. I don't know if it is in the U.K., but
I'm not sure.
yeah, we're gonna make an announcement that Mark will be running the Boston Marathon with me
Oh, wow.
uh, this April. So
What a moment.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it running has definitely not only saved my life, it's actually just brought us so close together. And what better way to celebrate that than running the Boston Marathon together?
Such a special day.
Yeah, and we'll be running it for the American Liver Foundation as well. So our friends at the American Liver Foundation, they are so excited that this is happening because what an opportunity to help raise awareness and hopefully inspire others to, that are suffering with liver disease and liver cancer, that there is life after transplant and beyond liver disease. So yeah, we're really chuffed about this.
Is there a place that people can go to donate if they'd like to?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can share the link with you. So Mark has actually just stood up his fundraising page.
Perfect.
So I'd be happy to share a link with you that you can put in the show notes if you'd like.
That'll be in the show notes. If you'd like to go and donate to Phil and Mark running the Boston Marathon, then you can find the link above, below, wherever it is on whatever app you're listening to, uh, and you can go and donate if you'd like to. I'm sure they'd appreciate it, and so would the American Liver Foundation.
Definitely. Thank you for that.
Now, has it all been going smoothly since then?
I would say yes.
Good
I
to
would
hear.
say yes. Yeah. I'm quite curious to learn what your post-transplant life is as well, because quite honestly, Lewis, I mean, I'm still navigating through the challenges of, my medication. I'll actually show you I mean, this is my medication box right here, right?
You're
And
organised.
yep, yep. So, I I've done a pretty good job at navigating my day around it because I know when it's going to be difficult, for me. And again, it's mainly fatigue that I have to deal with. But um, other than that, I would say that um, things are fairly normal. I still have to be extra cautious around people. I mean, it's just so funny, in this pandemic, right? I was telling people at the height of the pandemic, is, oh well, you know what it's like to be a transplant patient now.
Yeah.
so,
It's
so
it's been a nightmare, really, hasn't it? No,
yeah,
for
yeah. But
people in
obviously,
our
we need to be
position.
extra cautious. Yeah, but we obviously have to be extra cautious. So. But for the most part, I'd always been careful post transplant. Yeah, so I wanted to mitigate any risks, to make myself ill. So, and I would say that the pandemic probably hasn't really changed that. It's just expanded it to,
Yeah,
other people. So I'm taking the same steps, but I'm still on a pretty high dose of immunosuppressants at this moment. But I'm still able to do the things that I really enjoy doing. I'm still able to be, a father to my son, a husband to my wife, and and continue to run quite well. So as long as I can tick those three boxes, then I'm quite happy. And I'm also able to work. But the key for me is just having such a supportive um, workplace, my manager, and even our executive directors. They've been so supportive of my journey that they've given me every benefit needed for to continue to work effectively while taking extra and while being extra safe with my
yeah.
health.
That's exactly what we want. So that would be the ideal situation, I think, for everyone in who has to be extra careful at the moment.
Definitely.
Now, moving on to sport after transplant, we've had I posted on social media this morning actually asking for listener questions. So if you'd like the chance to feature on the podcast by answering a question, asking a question, you can do so by following Transplants Take on Sport on social media. Instagram and Facebook are at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter is at TTOS Pod. I've got one in from Oliver who says, how long was the recovery period before you were back to your usual self from the transplant?
Yeah, good question. The If we're talking usual self pre-transplant, I don't know if I'll ever get back to that. Yeah. Everything is pretty much different, but in terms of level of fitness, I was able to start running again, I would say 2 months post-transplant.
That's pretty good.
And again,
Yeah,
yeah. And again, I wouldn't recommend that for everybody, right? Even my own doctors weren't keen on me getting running again because again, their only experiences with people who've been quite sick prior to their transplant, right? They never really had, a marathoner come through the doors, get a transplant, and then go out. They just kind of use the same protocol with me. Is like, don't do anything heavy. Don't do any heavy physical activity for 3 to 5 months. Limit yourself to just walking. Walking was fine, but I was actually ready to run just a month or so after. So I would walk probably 2 to 3 times a day, anywhere between a half mile to a mile. And then once, as a runner, when you're ready to run. Yeah. So I would say it was probably about 6 weeks after that transplant when I felt like, okay, I think I could go for a little jog for about, 50 meters. So let's just see how it feels. Right. And 2 weeks after that, I was actually running like 2 miles. I mean, jogging, right, for two
yeah.
miles. And from there, I said, okay, I'm, yeah, I'm on my way to run again, right? So after my transplant, I actually ran my first half marathon. Um, that would have been 4 months after my transplant.
That's very quick compared to my sport's cricket, as a lot of listeners will now know if you've listened for a long time.
Mm.
and I was told 6 months before going back to sport or anything too strenuous. So you've done that's.
Yep.
I would say that's quite quick. You've done well there.
Yeah, yeah, I was quite happy. And I imagine with you just trying to swing a cricket bat with,
Yeah, it's not
major
ideal.
abdominal surgery, that's not ideal. Yeah.
Not in
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Not when it's close. Not close after your surgery.
Right. Or even just throwing the ball. I imagine that's just even today, almost over 2 years post transplant, throwing a ball still feels odd to me just because, my abdominal muscles are just
Yeah.
they're just beaten up from the surgery. Yeah.
I'm all good. I'm fine with all of it now, apart from maybe diving onto my right hand side.
Hmm.
But yeah, your scar, I've got mine's about 6 inches. Is yours bigger?
Mine's about 5 times bigger. Mine's a 30-inch
Right.
scar. Yeah.
That
So
explains the abdominal pain then. Or sounds like it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They call it the Mercedes scar. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
shaped
I've
like
heard
the
that.
Mercedes logo. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting looking scar, but we try and wear it as a badge of honor. Yeah.
I know you said that your marathon time at the moment is pretty good with what you're aiming for. Have you managed to reach your pre-cancer marathon times?
Oh, good question.
If you can remember.
Just 2 weeks ago, I actually tried to beat my half marathon best time, and I missed it by a minute. I missed
Oh,
it by a minute, but I'll tell you the reason why is because it was actually quite warm that day. I don't think it had anything to do with my transplant. I think it was just the
yeah.
day itself, right? So had I had a similar day to when I had run, because my best time is just a shade above, a few seconds above minute 32. So I was actually trying to break 132 and do sub 132, and I ended up doing just under 133. But had I had the same cool weather that I did when I did that PR, then I feel like I would have had a really good opportunity to do it. But I was just so cooked by the time I got to like mile 10, 11 of that half marathon. I said, all right, it's fine. So I ended up finishing like 145th overall. I finished fourth in my age group.
That's
But
good.
yeah,
Very
but then
good.
I do say that is like, but I did finish first of liver transplant
Yeah.
recipients. So
That's a big one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I always ask, okay, well, anybody who finished ahead of me, how many of you guys had a liver transplant? None? Okay, just checking.
I mean, your whole story is one of determination, and it shows the power of sport, particularly running. In your case, you've had bump after bump in your journey to getting where you are today.
Hmm,
So many knockbacks, and look at you now. You thriving. You've got the 50K coming up, Boston Marathon.
hmm.
Hopefully, it all goes well. And what a story!
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even if it doesn't go well, Liz, I'll tell you, just the fact that I have the opportunity to stand at that start line,
Yeah,
right, post transplant, because it obviously could have been much different, but you know, it, this journey post transplant, whether it's liver, whether it's kidney, whether it's heart or lung, I mean, being able to just have the opportunity to do these things again, right? To make you feel normal again. That's worth the that right there is worth the transplant itself, right? To be
definitely.
able to just wake up and seize an opportunity that you didn't think you'd be able to seize just a couple of years ago. So yeah, so much to be grateful for, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what other opportunities is given to us here in the transplant community.
You're spot on, and hopefully, there's many more to come in the near future. Before we come to the end of the podcast, we're getting towards the end now. It's time for the return that first featured in the last couple of episodes of Series 1. It's the return of the Transplants Take on Sport quiz.
Oh no. I see your menu kits in the background there, so I'm a little cautious here.
Oh no, it's fine. I can be objective.
Okay.
Um, so to just recap the how the quiz works, the rules, if you like. Each week, I will ask the guest 4 questions based on a sport of their choosing. And you sent me a message saying that when you were in the UK, you got into football. You like football,
Mm,
and you said to go easy on you with the questions. So I
yes,
came back
please.
to you asking what your team is. Your team is Liverpool. So all of your questions are based around Liverpool Football Club.
Okay.
Um, one question is a which is higher. There is one true or false, one what happens next, and one who am I. and the aim is to score as many points as possible, and I'll be keeping score as the podcasts go by. Now, the bar's been set pretty high at the moment, but football, anyone who picks football, they're probably going to be. I can tailor it more. That's the sport I've got the most knowledge in. So it's either could be
Okay.
very challenging or very easy. We'll see
Yeah.
how it goes. And if for any, this is an audio only podcast to tell how, just to gauge the level of excitement in this. Phil has leaned forward.
I am.
He's ready.
Leaning with fear.
So, question 1: which is higher?
Yes.
Now, so these are for anyone coming on in the future. These are pretty much purely guesswork with some over the week some pretty stupid questions coming in. Question 1: which is higher? The total number of points achieved by Liverpool in the Premier League era, or the amount of people who participated in the Guinness World Record attempt for the largest human mattress dominoes topple?
Oh, human mattress toppled, obviously.
For anyone who's wondering what that is, it's a strange photo. It's a load of people who've stood up and they've got a mattress strapped to their back, and they're all in a big spiral. And the first person just throws themselves backwards, and they all fall over. And that's the record for that.
Well, what was the number?
Have you gone with the mattress, human mattress?
I've gone with the mattress, yes.
So the human mattress dominoes, the world
Mm.
record is 2,019 people.
Yes.
Liverpool's total points in the Premier League, which is accurate as of the date of recording, which is the 1st of February 2022, is 2,017. So you're correct.
Yes.
Very close one there.
Yes.
Question 2.
We can stop there, actually.
Perfect score. Question 2. True or false? Here's your statement. Former Liverpool defender Jamie Carragher has scored more Premier League own goals than goals.
Oh gosh, I love Jamie.
Hello, Cara, if you're listening.
Yeah. Just out of pure support for him, I'm gonna say false.
You should have gone true.
Oh no,
Jamie Carragher
no.
He scored 3 goals in the Premier League as a defender, and he scored 7 own goals.
Oh dear.
Great pundit, not so great at putting the ball in the right net.
No. Well, yeah.
1 out of 2, not bad.
All right.
Question 3 is a what happens next, and now this is audio only. It's very difficult to show the clip of what might happen next. I will try every time that this is done to post the clip on social media once the podcast's been released, so you can see the clip for yourself. They're often quite funny. Okay. This one could be challenging as the footage is owned by Sky. I don't want to get taken down for copyright. So if you don't see it, that's why. But you can search on YouTube. It's all over that. So what happens next? On the 4th of October 1998, during a game between Liverpool and Chelsea at Anfield, Chelsea's Pierluigi Casiraghi receives the ball one-on-one with Liverpool goalkeeper David James on the edge of the 18-yard box. He takes the ball around James before having a shot at the open goal. Liverpool defender Phil Babb slides towards his own goal to block the ball. But what happens next? This is multiple choice. Is it A, he fails to block the shot, but carries on sliding feet first into the advertising boards? Is it B, he blocks the shot, but continues sliding into the goal, getting tangled in the net with each foot going through a separate hole? Or is it C, he fails to block the shot, but continues sliding towards the goal, straddling the post and smashing into it, testicles first?
Oh.
Good old Phil Babb.
Yeah. It sounds
a lot of people
like
may have seen the clip.
Yeah, it sounds like a C to me, if I'm being honest.
You would be correct.
Yeah.
Everyone watching it goes, ooh. As soon as you see it, there's a collective groan. It is C, so you're correct.
I will have to look that up.
If anyone does that now, it's sometimes referred to as doing a bab.
Okay. I did not know that.
He actually had to come off injured in that game as a couple of vertebrae in his lower back were pushed to one side and he missed 6 weeks of games.
Oh, well, that's one way to hide an embarrassment, right?
It's a sickening blow. It's
Oh, wow.
horrible. You might see that on social media. It may be up there by the time this has been
Yeah.
released.
Yeah. Hashtag pulling a bab, right? I'll look it up.
Question 4 is a who am I? So remember, all your questions are based behind
Mm,
Liverpool, based around Liverpool. So you've got a free
mm,
clue there. So how this works is I'll give you 4 clues to guess the player, and after those 4 clues, you have a guess. If that guess is incorrect, I can then give you 3 more clues with a guess in between each one. So
there.
you've got 4 goes to get this. So who am I? I was born in November 1981. I have played with Cristiano Ronaldo. I've scored in the Champions League final for Liverpool, and I've won the Champions League with 2 different clubs. So at the time of recording, he's 40 years old. He's played with Cristiano Ronaldo, scored in the Champions League final for Liverpool, and won the Champions League with 2 different clubs. Who might you guess? What's your thought
Mm,
process?
it's the Ronaldo bit that's
Throwing you.
throwing me off. Yeah. Yeah.
So Ronaldo, he's
So,
played for Manchester United, Sporting
yeah.
Lisbon beforehand, Real Madrid, Juventus, and
Yeah.
now back at Manchester United again, and also Portugal.
Right. The only guess I can come up with that's somewhat sensible would be Michael Owen.
It's not Michael Owen. You get an extra clue with another guess afterwards.
Sure.
This player has won 2 World Cups and the European Championships. No, not 2 World Cups. He's won 1 World Cup and 2 European Championships.
Not Germany. Not
That was late.
one World
That
Cup.
was late 2000s, early 2010s.
Late 2000, early 2010s.
So to recap, 40 years old, played with Cristiano Ronaldo, scored for Liverpool in the Champions League final, won the Champions League with 2 different clubs, and has won 1 World Cup and 2 European Championships.
2 euros, you say?
What's the thought process?
My thought is I'm trying to find a thought.
Did you? So do you
I
remember
know it's
watching?
gonna, yeah. Yeah, go on.
Next one. He's a central midfielder.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to pass, Lewis. You're gonna have to make
You've
me.
got one more clue towards
Okay.
it. I might be able to give you a bonus one. I'll give you a bonus one
Okay.
beforehand.
Yep.
So the team that he played with Ronaldo at is Real Madrid,
At
and
Real.
he's Spanish.
And he's Spanish.
Does that get you it before your final clue?
Yeah, I'm really stuck right now. I'm
It might be a tough one. The final clue: this player shares a surname with a current Chelsea defender.
the current Chelsea defender. Yes, I'm sorry, Lewis.
Stuck.
My head's just not in. Yeah, I'm completely stuck right now.
If anyone at home, if you got it before I say the answer, why not get in touch? Let me know. Comment on the Instagram post.
Yeah, help me out.
You might kick yourself. I'm not sure. I don't know if I've gone obscure here. It's Xabi Alonso.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not bad. 2 out of 2, 50%. It's setting the bar in the middle for the start of Series 2.
For the next one, yeah. For the next one,
I'm
yeah.
sure they'll be higher and I'm sure they'll be lower.
Yeah. No. They can completely shatter it. So yeah.
And one more question from me before we go. It's the
Yes.
question I ask everybody at the end of the podcast.
Of course.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone facing a transplant?
Wow, that's a big question, Lewis. I'll be honest. Uh, I would honestly say is when you're facing a transplant and especially if you're waiting for a transplant, the advice that I've given to those that I work with in the transplant support group is just find a way to get to the next day. Yeah, whatever it is that helps you get to that next day, right? Because when you're waiting for your transplant, Lewis, there is so much negativity that you could lean to. Yeah, like what if I never get my transplant, right? What if I never uh, uh, what if a match is never identified? Yeah, you can't control that. And as a runner, right, I can only recommend that you control what you can control, and that's honestly your own mind and your own hopefulness, right? So whatever it takes to help you get to that next day. Before you know it, you'll reach the finish, you'll get to your transplant, right? So that is honestly the best way I can keep your focus small, keep your goals small, enough to just get you to the end of the day. Because when you wake up, you're going to get that phone call saying that your transplant has been matched and come on in, we're going to get you, we're going to extend your life. So that's the best advice I can honestly give you.
Very well said, and I'm sure people who are listening who are going through that scary time of facing a transplant, I'm sure that'll resonate with them and hopefully help them out. Phil, what a pleasure to have you on the podcast. You're an inspiration. Your story is remarkable. So determined to get through everything you've done, and I'm sure a lot of people will take a lot of positives from what you've said, and they'll be able to help them through their journey. So thank you for coming on.
No, absolutely. And thank you, Lewis. Thank you for creating this platform for all of us to show that, there is more than just, a life after transplant. There's success and there are, achievements in front of us that you never thought you'd ever be able to achieve even before transplant. So thank you for having this platform and community for all of us.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so
Thank
honored
you.
to be a part of it.
My pleasure. Lovely to have you on. There we go. Phil Shin, my guest today. If you are enjoying the podcast, please make sure you share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with people on the street. Go and shout anywhere about it. I'd love to have as many of you listening as possible, and we can really grow this community, grow the podcast, and spread it to as many people as possible. If you'd like to get in touch, whether that be just to send a message, if you'd like to come on the podcast, please feel free to do so and let me know. Or if there's somebody who I should be contacting to get on and come and have a chat as well, you can do so by emailing transplantstakeonsport@gmail.com, or you can get in touch on social media. They're linked in the show notes, but in case you want to go to them through this, Instagram and Facebook are at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter is at TTOS Pod. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, which is the most used app to listen to the podcast on, it would mean a massive amount to me if you could go and rate the podcast 5 stars on there. And if you leave a review with your 5-star rating, all 5-star reviews will be read out in this section of the podcast. The ratings section has now also come to Spotify. So again, it'd be hugely appreciated if you could go and give it a 5-star rating on there. If you don't think it's 5 stars, fair enough, perfectly entitled to that. I'd rather you told me so I can make any changes that are necessary rather than going and doing it on there, because if it is rated higher, more people discover it through the search section. And I know I sometimes mention this. I don't always like to mention it, but there is the Acast supporter feature, which is it's a voice at the start, a voiceover. It's not me; it's somebody else. It's a way of donating to me, the podcast, to help keep it going, help support financially. If you'd like to do that, then please feel free to do so. There's a link in the show notes right at the bottom. If you don't, then no pressure, no worries. It's all up to you. This isn't my full-time job, but I'd like something like this to be my job in the future. So anything like that helps to make that a reality. Thank you once again to my guest today, Phil Shin. I've been Lewis Daniels, and you've been listening to Transplants Take on Sport.